Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at classicstoday.com. And Finster is over here to my left, and Mildred is at my feet. And if I try to pick them up, they're going to run away. So there's no point. Anyway, I'm here to discuss a very interesting issue. Is the repertoire shrinking? The active performing repertoire that we see when we go to concerts and things. I was having a conversation with the piano maven himself, Jed Disler, whose blog of that name is just extremely interesting, and I hope you all listen to it. And I just, I mentioned the fact that I had done a review of the Christian Sinding symphonies. And Sinding is one of those composers who is known for one single work. It's a little piano piece of fluff called Rustle of Spring, Frühlingsrauschen. And I played it when I was studying piano, or tried to play it. Who am I kidding? But Jet can play it. He played it for me over the phone. He can do anything. And he hadn't played it in 400 years, but he still could do it better than I ever learned how to do it. Anyway, the point is that he mentioned that, this is a lovely work, and there's all this pretty music he wrote that doesn't get played. No one does it. No one's doing it regularly. And there are a whole pile of works in the piano repertoire, and we've talked about some of them, that just don't get performed anymore. Works for piano and orchestra, like the Franck Symphonic Variations, which used to be everywhere. And these things sort of come and go. And there's a difference between the coming and goingness of the repertoire, because there's always a certain churning and rotation and interest depending on the style and taste of whatever epoch we happen to be living in, and an actual reduction in what gets played, in the range or scope of the repertoire. And when it comes to symphonic music, we were talking about how, people just basically do Brahms or Bruckner or Mahler as a big symphony, and then they do a Rachmaninoff concerto, and that's programming these days. It's very, very difficult to do other things. And if you're a record critic, particularly as I am, because I tend not to review live concerts as much. I go to live concerts just to enjoy the music, and I almost invariably do, even if the performance sucks. But the point is that there is so much available on recordings compared to what you actually hear in concert. And again, this is a topic we've talked about before, and that's why I've done fabulous concert programs, hundreds of programs of unusual repertoire in a concert setting, just to show how it could be done with lots of unusual composers. But it seems to me, and to Jed, as in an impressionistic way, that the repertoire is shrinking, the actual performing repertoire. And there are a lot of reasons for it. And so if that is indeed happening, I wanted to suggest some possible explanations. I think in terms of the piano repertoire, for example, or the solo repertoire, particularly in the keyboard, one of the things that has changed is that the audience is very, very different from what it was. Back in the 30s and 40s or 20s or, whatever it was, even up to the 60s, many, many people who went to recitals could be assumed to be familiar with the piano repertoire because they played it themselves. And a lot of the pieces that they played, they would look forward to hearing done by a great master. Rustle of Spring is a case in point. Maybe it's a piece of fluff. Maybe it's just an encore piece now. But wouldn't it be lovely? To just hear it, have a Martha Argerich show up and do Rustle of Spring. It would be fabulous, and have an audience that had played it too. So there was this familiarity between the artists and the audience, and the artist could take a piece. Jed had mentioned Weber's Invitation to the Dance, which is another wonderful work. Pieces that they would grace any concert program, but you just don't hear them these days. And people who studied piano and were talented amateurs or decent amateurs would have played those pieces and would look forward to hearing them. And so it would make the whole experience of going to recital so much more rewarding. Nowadays, we're getting to the point where a piano recital is going to consist of Beethoven's Hammerklavier on the first half, the Liszt Sonata on the second half, and maybe some Chopin etudes for encores. That's basically what it is. Or there are these these omnibus nightmare things like the entire Bach well-tempered clavier at one sitting, for people who are into, penitential punishments, that kind of thing. It's very, very strange what's happening, I think, in our concert life. And a lot of soloists, and this I know for a fact, do not know this repertoire, what used to be the popular repertoire. A lot of them they'll attach themselves to a contemporary composer, or they'll learn the Philip Glass etudes, or something like that. There are trendy pieces that people pick up, and there are, sort of contemporary classics that come and go. But there was a repertoire, and a sustained romantic repertoire of wonderful music. And, Jed, I'm hoping, will do some blogs about it, because he knows much more about it than I do when it comes to piano music. When it comes to orchestral music, I think the situation is similar, but also for different reasons. I think in the orchestral world, the reason is simple laziness, extraordinary laziness, the need to fill a hall with famous names. And, Mahler sells and Bruckner, people think sells. I don't think it does, but they say it does. And maybe it does. But Bruckner is easy, as I said many times, for conductors who aren't comfortable with sonata form to learn, because it's all slow and it's all in 4/4 or 3/4, and the climaxes are brassy and gorgeous, and you're in business that way. But it just also seems to me that today's conductor's jet-setting mentality is suited to these kinds of simplistic and repetitive programming, because everyone's doing the same stuff, and they learn their repertoire for that season, and then they go flying around from orchestra to orchestra, and they're all doing the same thing, and they don't have much rehearsal time, and nobody wants to take the time to learn unusual repertoire that's going to require effort. I mean, real effort. And then the other thing that's happened in the orchestral world, of course, which has been just horrible for your average concert goer, is the period instrument movement, because they have claimed the Baroque and classical repertoire. And there's an enormous amount of hypocrisy going on there, of course, because these early music ensembles are applying their misguided theories to much later music that they have no business attempting. And they play it wrong, which makes it sound weird, which they think is right. But they scream bloody murder when modern ensembles do their repertoire, the classical repertoire. And that means a huge swath of repertoire is now just gone. It's not that we heard a lot of it anyway. I mean, we didn't. It was very rare to hear a Haydn Sturm und Drang symphony, for example, at a regular symphony concert. But you could sometimes get the farewell. I mean, some conductors did middle period and interesting Haydn and Mozart. Leonard Slatkin did it. Rostropovich did Haydn's 80th Symphony. It was wonderful. People actually got a big kick out of it. So there are people who did these things, but even now that seems to have totally vanished. And that repertoire is now the province of either period instrument ensembles or chamber orchestras, which are now everywhere, regularly constituted full-time chamber orchestras that do, that particular repertoire, and they specialize. And, the harbinger of that was the Mostly Mozart Festival. Remember the Mostly Mozart Festival? But, that has become an anachronism, the Mostly Mozart Festival, because it was full of interesting music from the classical period. It was mostly Mozart. It wasn't entirely Mozart. And that was an opportunity to hear that kind of stuff, because it wasn't getting played as often on standard concert programs. But these things were done in association with larger performing organizations and those standard concert programs. So there was a world of repertoire that you could sample under one roof. And that's where I think it's diminishing. It really is. And again, I very seldom go to live concerts because I find the programming so boring. And every so often, one of you writes to me about your local orchestra, which is wonderful. That's doing wonderful programming under really imaginative music directors and artists. And they put these things together and they look fabulous. And it is wonderful because it's happening, but it doesn't happen at the highest level. It happens in the provinces. It happens out in the world at large, where you find the smaller or lesser ensembles that don't have the kind of money pressure to always be doing the big blockbuster stuff, and they're not getting the big names, the big name artists who only do that limited amount of repertoire. I mean, I've been doing a lot of videos. I'm going to do a lot more about Charles Mackerras, the great generalist conductor who could do anything. He was, a Janacek specialist. He was a Handel specialist, but he would do Baroque opera in modern opera houses, and he would just edit it or cut it. He would do whatever he needed to do to create a musically valid, viable performance experience. And that's what we should be doing. We should be using this material that has been left to us by generations of geniuses to encounter the music. And if it means playing Hamilton Hardy's arrangement of Handel's water music or fireworks music, whatever, that's what we should be doing. There's no reason to deprive audiences of the richness of our musical legacy simply because, the artists themselves are too lazy or have no incentive to go beyond the same stuff. And audiences have also, I believe, have also become lazy because, yes, they will pack an auditorium for a Mahler symphony, and rightly so. I mean, who wouldn't want to go see a Mahler symphony? But they should also be packing the auditorium for the Malcolm Arnold symphony, or the Ludwig Ergens Jensen symphony, or whatever, Passacaglia, or there are all these wonderful pieces, and it makes me upset. It bothers me that it's so difficult to find just a spark of creativity. And, there are, like I said, sparks. There's Leon Botstein, who does wonderful, interesting programming with the orchestra now. But the interesting programming people are now specialists. And that's the problem. Everything has specialized. It's all fragmented and gone off. It's what's happened in academia. Everything has become a specialty. And there are some things that are best appreciated entire, in the whole, when you can actually experience the widest possible range of variety and contrast and style and idiom and musical language. That's what really turns me on to our classical legacy. That's what gets me out to a concert. The idea to have just a tremendous amount of variety and to experience something new but good, new and worthwhile. To go see the Francisco Mignone piano concerto. Wow, would I go see that in a heartbeat? I don't know if anyone else would. But, but the problem with this limited approach, the museum mentality, as it's often called, whether it's in solo recitals or in concerts, is that it teaches people to fear music. It teaches them to fear the new, the unusual, the different, the unfamiliar. It ought to be a situation. When I was running Repertoire for New York Symphonic Arts, the community orchestra in Manhattan that I played in for decades, we gave free concerts, and the audience was usually like over 90, and it was a lot of little old ladies in the auditorium of Julia Richmond High School. It was such a wonderful experience, and the people in the orchestra were just great. And the repertoire we did was all over the place. We did Martineau, we did Frank Bridge, we did Vaughan Williams, we did George Lloyd, we did Roussel, we did all kinds of stuff. And the people who came just came because they wanted to get out and hear some music. And that was, in many respects, the best way to experience the music, for people who just love to go out and hear music. And that's what it ought to be. That's, to me, the healthiest way to approach the classics. And I still believe that, and I still have hope that, that attitude hasn't vanished entirely. But I'm worried. I'm concerned. I think there's an issue out there. And I'm curious to see what you think about it. So keep on listening, friends. Feel free to comment, and thank you so much for joining me. Take care.